I wonder if that is obviously a computer that says that recording in progress. Kind of, I wonder if you could pick male names too. Anyway, or male voices.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hello, folks. Welcome to another episode of the Tough Through Tender Critical Conversations podcast series. And joining me today is a lovely lady who I've known for around 6 years now. She's based out in Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada right now. So there's a bit of a time difference. So I really appreciate you getting up early and joining me today, Annie McCullough. Annie, thank you for joining me. How are you doing?
Hi, Nick. I'm great. So nice to be here. Lovely to be with you, and happy to, offer assistance and anything that I can do to be of service. So
Yeah, let's just have a conversation. I saw Frankie's ears perk into the picture there, so you're not alone.
you're never alone, especially not with a
No,
French bulldog. Yes, let's just tell everybody now, if they hear snoring, it's not somebody who's gotten bored. It's my lovely emotional support dog, Frank.
Frank, and I'm sure we're going to get into a little bit of Frank's story later on because had a bit of a situation with Frank in the last year that I want to get into because it really does. Oh wow, it hits the heart. So I want to get there, and let's start this. We did find out. We've declared you are a hockey fan. You grew up in Toronto, so you're Maple Leafs fan. So you're fine with the three periods of that we're going to go through in 20 minutes. I have been really bad at timing them, so I'm going to start these. And Annie, you are also a woman who knows about recovery, so you know how we tell our stories in a general way, what it was like or what happened and what it's like now. So this should work out really perfect for us.
Lucky us.
Lucky us. Okay, let's drop the puck and start our first period. And Annie, yeah, I have actually done a little bit of research. I saw some videos of you online and you telling your story. And I think just like anybody's story, it's interesting to go right back to the beginning to see how we grow up and what molds us and shapes us and creates traumas in our bodies that can manifest themselves into of things that need to be healed later on in life. So tell us, what was it like for young Annie growing up in Toronto?
Well, I always, now that I understand it better, now that I have a firm grounding in the ACEs study, and if people don't know what that is, it's the Adverse Childhood Experiences study that Kaiser Permanente did many years ago now. But I like to start even before the beginning, if that makes sense, because what's actually true for me is that I was probably in a very, let's say, anxious womb of a 16-year-old young woman who was pregnant with me and knowing she was giving me up for adoption. So I think that now that I understand, I really understand, what that would have been like. Not, I can't remember it, but it's such a big piece of the story. And I've met so many people along my recovery journey that are in the same situation, that were adopted, that there's a beautiful book about it as well. So if there's any other adoptees that are listening to this, The Primal Wound is a really beautiful book that you can read about to get a better understanding of this. So that I tell that now because I think it's important. So my parents, my mom, who was born and raised in Newfoundland, my dad, who was born and raised in Montreal, met and got married in Montreal and couldn't have children, and tried very hard and waited a long time to adopt me. So the story of my adoption, I would say, was told to me very early and in a very beautiful way. In fact, it was my favorite bedtime story. Please tell me my adoption story. So they were both professionals. My mom's a nurse. My dad was a chemical engineer. And they were also both very unwell, in the sense of had never dealt with their own traumas. And my dad was an active alcoholic. So there was a lot of uncertainty growing up, a lot of not knowing what was going to happen next. And that led to a great deal of nervous system dysregulation for me, which again, I did not know at the time. At the time, I was just a young child trying to figure things out. There's some stories that I remember about, specifics of my dad's drinking and stuff that are not, really pleasant, finding him passed out on the floor, coming home, things like that that are, I don't know that they still, affect me necessarily, but I know that they deeply affected me in my childhood and led, like I said, to a very dysregulated nervous system. And probably I spent a lot of time in my room. I dove into books, I dove into music, and candy was my first real escape. I mean, books, I think, are still fairly healthy. Music, still fairly healthy. Candy kind of became this, get my allowance on Friday nights and like eat as much candy and chips and chalk, as much as possible. And
What age would this have been around?
yeah, 7,
Mm.
10, in that age range, because we were still living in a Tobico. A little bit later, when I'm 11, we move out of that. But I would also say that I was, very engaged in school. I was in the gifted program. I was, the books, I think, helped a lot. I was quite advanced in my vocabulary and in my, just awareness and knowledge of stuff. So there was lots of good in my childhood too. I don't just because I was raised in this alcoholic family doesn't mean I didn't have fun and friends and some successes, and played sports and loved horses and did a lot of horseback riding, and there was lots of good
Mm.
too.
But what were the feelings that were like? You talk about trauma because I know you understand and you're knowledgeable about interwomb trauma and generational trauma and seeing your father in an alcoholic state in his cups. And I imagine you're seeing that in the ages of 4 or 5, and then you're starting to use sugar as I imagine a coping mechanism at around 7. So what were the feelings like for you to need that sugar? What hole was it filling at such a young age?
Oh, you want me to get vulnerable on you, Nick? Okay. Just teasing. I just had a therapy session about this yesterday, so it's pretty close and raw. It's not hard to access. I do tend, this is like what you just witnessed is me doing what I've always done, right? That is my coping mechanism. I can talk about it in a very dissociated way because it's not like I'm talking about somebody else. But when you ask me about the feelings, I think the feelings, I don't think, I'll remove that word. I feel, I felt alone. I wanted love and attention, and I didn't get those things very much. I just put this together yesterday after, many, many years on this planet. It was my birthday yesterday and I was having a therapy session. Disclaimer, don't do that. Way to interrupt the birthday flow. Have a therapy session with your somatic experiencing practitioner. My mom was a nurse and she knew how to nurse. And I think that's what I basically, I either manifested or really was sick quite a bit when I was a child. And that is how I got what I needed from my mother, is by being sick. If I had a stomach ache or a cold or a fever or any of those things, I would get attention and get taken care of. But to answer your question, I think my baseline needs were not being met. Not for food and shelter and stuff. I mean, that was being met, but my emotional needs, my spiritual needs, were not being met. And that's where the candy and soon after too, like cigarettes came into the picture, like probably at 10. My dad was a smoker, so I would steal cigarettes from him. Yeah, there was a lot of longing, I think, is the word we came up with yesterday. A longing for things that were not.
I really relate to that. I mean, it was like my father was an active alcoholic, and he did the best that he could. He was untreated, and he was running from his situation to move to Canada with my mom and my sister. And I remember that feeling of I was the youngest, I was the baby. I didn't experience the violence that my sisters and my mom experienced, but I saw it. And I believe now it is in that I lost this feeling of security. And I started to find security in stealing. Like I would just nick things for things that I didn't need. And these lies and these manipulations that would go along with it, that I started to believe my own lies and my own fantasies. So I had no real sense of self. Do you identify that with as a young person?
Yeah, I really do actually. And it's funny because I had forgotten that. I did the same thing. I haven't thought about that in like forever, but that was I wouldn't say was a big piece. And I don't know that I ever made the connection that you just made, which is that I was creating safety or security for myself. But definitely stealing, like stupid stuff, like and getting caught for it too, which was so humiliating, right? Like had a pocket full of I was probably 10 years old, and my friend Jennifer and I shouldn't throw her under the bus, but I'm not going to say her last name, but we got caught by her dad with like pockets full of like feminine sanitary products that neither of us needed at 10, but we stole from the store. And it's funny, I'm getting hot thinking about it, which is a new thing for me too. Like when I really feel my emotions now, I actually have like a change in my body temperature. It's so bizarre. Um, yeah, so yeah, stealing for and security. Thank you for that reminder too, because that was, in my session yesterday and talking about these things after going to this sort of painful place of remembering the longing and the stomach ache that I would have, like aching, longing, right, for something that I wasn't getting. We then, that one of the best parts of therapy is creating those safe places again, right? And really anchoring into like what it feels to be safe in my own body. I don't want to I don't want to say don't, but there's definitely there was some sexual inappropriateness uh on the part of my adoptive father that I brought to my mother's attention, and she, in her own wounded way, I don't want to throw her under the bus either, but she shared, like she said to me, well, you asked him what this was, so he showed you, basically, and so it became my fault. And later when I tried to discuss it with her, as a more an adult or whatever, she denied that it ever happened. And like I don't I read this in a book about codependency the other day, but it just really hit home that it is the most actually destructive form of abuse, is to deny someone else's reality. I mean, we hear about it all the time with gaslighting these days with in relationships, but this is, from your caregiver, from your primary caregiver, to have that not be dealt with, and to have it put back on me, and then to have it negated, is just it exactly landed me where you said, which is I had no sense of self. I became a pretzel, and I know I'm jumping ahead and I won't go too far, but I'll just say that was my story, is becoming this people pleasing chameleon. Who do you need me to be? Oh, you need me to be that? I could do that. I could be this. I can be that. Who do you need? What do you need me to do? Who do you need? And really not feeling safe or secure in like who I was. And when I got sober, and again, this is definitely a way far ahead, but I will just say that there was a moment where I was like, holy crap, I have no idea who I am. I'm 37 years old and I have no idea who I am. And that is, as a direct result of that, the way that I was brought up without having, a sense of self instilled.
I found that those chameleon-like abilities, which I now know were to be defense mechanisms, actually start, so being an athlete to please my father, manipulating people, charming girls, charming teachers, all of this kind of thing of just basically BSing my way through life started to grow into, assets where by BSing, I got a career, I got a life. And then all of a sudden the consequences of these defense mechanisms become, character assets. So how did your defense mechanisms as a child grow into, ultimately becoming a DJ and doing some really cool stuff in a career that maybe you never knew you wanted?
Yeah, I mean, I love listening to your, I liked your, I liked your, the way you described your liabilities into assets. Yeah, I mean, the first thing I want to say is like I'm in a period right now of real introspection again, like another layer in my recovery. So looking at codependency again and reading this book about and talking a lot about shame and how these things are still manifesting in my life, and hearing you say, BSing my way into a career. Well, I mean, I don't even know if I've ever said this like ever out loud, but like I lied on my like I don't anymore, but I lied on my resume for years. Years. You know, I BS'd my way into a lot of and even and it's funny, so like the DJ thing, okay, great, my love of music and my dad's passion for music, and just being exposed to tons of music as a child for sure, and and then finding my way into the rave scene and becoming a DJ. Like, I mean, I don't know that I would have necessarily like followed that trajectory. I played the clarinet and the saxophone. I love playing music. I love singing. I love everything about music, really. I'm not sure that I BS'd my way into that exactly, but my other life, my daytime life, and like what I did for a living, was like I BS'd my way through my typing class. You know what I mean? Like that, like I just it's really interesting to be in this conversation right now, because you're bringing up stuff that I either have like I said, not thought about, or for a long time, or just not ever made these connections. So I'm like, wow, whew, I'm gonna get hot again here. It's 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 like I really do. I feel like I am stripping away all of the BS now, though. Like it really, I'm 52. Just like, like how did that happen? And 15, I'm in my 15th year of recovery, and it's really only been these last few months where I really feel like I know who I am. It's taken that long. And this morning is still I was like, oh, okay, I guess I got some other stuff to write about on my next step 4. Probably got some amends to, whoa, I just spilled my coffee. I got some amends to make on some BSing I did that probably has never made it onto any of my previous work. Thanks, Nick. Just
Oh,
kidding.
you're welcome. You're welcome. I know, like I say, like for that, I never drank or did drugs growing up because I didn't want to be like my dad. And for some reason, the lying, the manipulating, the stealing, they kind of kept the emptiness at bay. But I know in your story, you actually used alcohol from a young age, and I think for people to know, where alcohol, the consequences of our drinking gets worse, but in the beginning, alcohol is a solution to that, filling that hole and to building us up. So, what was that like? What was your first experience was with alcohol use, and then kind of briefly give us a rundown into where that brought you.
Okay. Well, the two things I want to say about alcohol before I like, or the thing I want to say before I talk about my own, is that my dad's alcoholism was not discussed in any way, shape, or form. In fact, it was completely like a non-issue. Now, I know this is very common in alcoholic homes, and the codependency that goes along with it, the person who is trying to cover up or keep the other person's transgressions secret is very common. Don't trust, don't talk, don't feel. Those are the rules of engagement in a house like mine. So had I understood what alcoholism was, had I been talked to about how that led to my father's death when I was 11, maybe I would not have, I would have been more aware of it and taken the route you took, which is like, I don't want to be that. I understand what that is, and I don't want to go there, so I'm not going to. But instead, because it was never discussed, all I ever saw about alcohol, because my parents were, I don't mean partiers in like, but it was the 70s. It was the era of dinner parties in the early 80s. It was friends coming over, dinners, drinks, and who knows, maybe other stuff too. I don't know, but I was, what I saw of alcohol was it was fun. it was not, I mean, I saw the negative effects, except those were never talked about. It was never that connection was never made for me. And I just want to really make that clear, because I may have made a different decision. I may not have, but I may have, because knowledge, as we know, is at least, gives, it's not knowledge. Knowing it isn't half the battle. I always say too, it's more like a 10th, but it gives something. So, I started stealing the cigarettes. My friend, who I'm still very good friends with and neighbors with again after 40 years, we took our first drinks together. We went to this house party. I think I was 14, and someone's parents were away. They had just been away. That's it. They had brought back some rum from Jamaica or whatever. It was 151 proof rum. That's my first foray into alcohol. No dipping toes into a little sip of sherry or wine, or like, I don't know what other people, or a beer maybe, but nope, straight into the deep end I went. And I don't remember how much I drank, but what I think is interesting is I remember, the house where we were, who was there, all the things, and the drink, the glass even that I drank it out of is like vivid in my memory. It was a boot and it had a handle.
I remember those.
Right?
Yeah.
So off to the races, and it wasn't pretty. Like, it was not a good first experience, right? I was so sick almost immediately. I don't remember exactly like the timeline, but I had to be basically assisted, one of those arms on either side of people, accompanied to the bus, and threw up out the bus window. Like these are not, fun things. And yet again, because no one was talking about it, and I think I stayed over at Hannah's house that night, not at my own house. So my mom didn't find out about the drinking, but there was no way to, again, make that connection, right? Like, this is what happens when you do this, and that's probably not a good idea. So you don't want to do that again. And instead it became just a game for me. Like, how much can I drink without getting to that point? Right. And then later finding, drugs that would help me drink more and not get to that point of throwing up. But, when I went to treatment eventually, spoiler alert, ended up in rehab. I I had to write this, or do this on a big piece of paper. You're supposed to like draw out your use, you know what I mean? So like, here I am 14 and then 37. And most people's are like these arcs, it was like up, and then maybe they stop or try to stop, and those kinds of things, or like whatever, some sort of, mine was like up, across, down, right? Like, there was no, yeah. There was no stopping. There was no trying to stop. There was no awareness that there was a problem. It was just, everything about my life became about drinking, which is perfect for a DJ. Everybody's bringing you drinks and giving you free things. Like, I often say, there's no way I would have drank as much as I did. And an eagle just flew overhead as I said this. True. Always a good way to know you're telling the truth when an eagle flies over. I couldn't have afforded to drink the way I drank. Are you kidding me? I drank like 15, 20 drinks a night. I don't know what that would have cost back then, but it's just no way. Right. So, with the lack of information, with the, finding the friends, and I slowly went from like straight A student and, sports and music and band and to like parties. That's it. Boys, parties. Barely made it through. I mean, I made it through school because I was intelligent enough to study and write the exams and the tests and pass those things, but like missed more classes than I attended, and, just was the furthest thing from a model student. And then as we say in I changed my goals to meet my behavior, right? Like, oh, I don't really need to go to university, right? Like, yeah, I'll just work at the bar, or keep working at the shoe store. Like, just, I didn't end up going back to school and finishing anything really until I was in my late 30s, once I got into recovery.
Was this fun? Was it fun?
It was really fun in high school. It was really fun in my 20s, right? It was so much, was like, it was so social, right? It was boating and skiing and parties and people and cottages, and like it was fun. Like absolutely it was fun. And part of me wanted to say yes immediately, right? And just say yes, it was so much fun, except that I can't, like, and I don't know when I slipped from denial into delusion or whatever it was, like there was a point obviously where things changed, and we can, I don't know if we're into our second period yet, but you'll let me know. You're gonna do a
Yeah,
buzzer or something?
we're just wrapping up the first period.
Okay, all right. So we'll still talk about what happened. Or how it was. So the fun part changed from not being fun, but I didn't know it, right? And that's the whole point of my life. Like if I've said this many times, I'm going to write a book and it will be called I Know That I Know That, Just Not Right Now. Right? Like something in me knew that I should stop this. Something in me knew that this was not helping me anymore, that this was no longer fun, that this was no longer, a healthy coping mechanism. But there was so much I learned as a child about denial and just not talking about things and not looking. If everything looks good on the outside, then it must be okay on the inside. And that is just obviously the opposite of what's true. But I didn't have enough, conscious awareness of that. So it definitely stopped being fun. It would still seem fun, if that makes sense. Like I'd still be going out and being social. I did not ever end up as a person drinking at home alone, drinking in the mornings, with physical dependencies. But the fun part became, as you talked about earlier, lying, right? I met my husband my future husband. I met him when I was 33, and he had a very strong boundary around drugs. And he was like, I don't care what you do with the drinking. I drink, we drink, it's party time, all good. But the drugs, that's like a deal breaker. And I 100% meant it when I said to him, oh my God, yeah, you know what? I'm 33 now, or maybe I was almost 34 by that point when we had the conversation. And I'm like, yeah, this is definitely time to stop that. And I meant it. And I sincerely meant it when I said that I would stop. But I could not stop because that's the thing that had happened when I was, so busy having fun that I didn't notice that it had no longer become an option for me, so then I became a liar. And again, right? Like I'd stopped lying in my early 20s. I had a big sort of situation come up with one of my best friends, and she just said to me, you got to look at this. And I did, and I did some counseling, and I stopped being a liar. And then I became a liar again because of my desire to change my behavior to match my goals. It wasn't possible,
I think that's a good way to end the first period, Annie.
Drop the puck. Or wait, can we do a
No, it's a
buzzer?
hooter.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, you gotta get a
That's
buzzer.
insert sound effect right now. I'm wondering, in this little period break, if you were a hockey player, what would you do in the intermission? Do you know at all? What would your superstitions be as you rested up?
Oh, I probably wouldn't, I would do nothing. I would just sit and take deep breaths and connect to my higher power and
Yeah.
Ask
Or
for
back in the 70s, if you were playing, you'd have a beer and a smoke or something, maybe.
yeah.
Yeah, there were hockey players. I played with guys who actually went outside for a cigarette, and they were really good hockey players.
During breaks.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And I later found out sometimes they were smoking the funny stuff.
Oh, the funny stuff.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they were great hockey players. So anyway, thank you for that. Let's start our second period now.
Okay.
I have to drop the puck. Hold on a second. And Annie, as you were speaking about, and I feel like I know what's going to happen. When this line ends up going like this, and for me, that line went down a couple of times, and it was a mother's death and drink driving conviction. It was a huge breakup, and another drink driving conviction, and a sentence in Thurlow Penitentiary in St. Catharines. Both of those times I drank immediately as soon as I came out of prison. And when people ask me, Nick, come on, that's a wake up call. Like, you're seeing all these things are happening to you. You're seeing and being involved in the deep, dark, dastardly things that you would never associate yourself with guns and knives and drug dealers, and putting yourself into these positions. Stop, please stop. And as we're telling you, you believed, you were promising your husband, and you believed it. And I think what I really want people who are not afflicted with the illness of addiction or alcoholism is that no amount of willpower, once we start and consume a substance, and it creates this abnormal reaction, there is no stopping us. And then there's that insane part of, even though if you stop for a week or a month, it wasn't that bad. The guy with the knife to my chest and the gun that wasn't that bad. Thurlow Penitentiary with murders and rapists and drug dealers, sleeping on a floor and almost getting beaten up because I spit my toothpaste in the wrong sink. That wasn't that bad. Surely I can have a glass of wine with my pizza. So, how does this thing happen for you? And I know you saw some very dark things. I know trauma is a huge part of your journey, but where was it where enough was enough, and hope arose in your life, where a solution was presented itself to you?
Mm. Well, again, you just like the way you asked that question really, it requires an answer it doesn't change the trajectory of the actual use, because that's what that line was, right? It's use. But there were two moments, right? There were two very, very distinct premonitory moments where I was given an opportunity and I did not listen. And I often say now that, the universe, it whispers the first time, hey, psst, you should really take a look right now, and if you don't listen, then the next time it's a knock, it's sometimes a louder knock, but it's definitely a knock. And it again is like, hey, wake up. You need to pay attention here. This is not working. And then if you don't listen that time, then you get the 2x4 to the back of the head. And I don't mean that violently. I don't mean it, I'm not a violent person, but I mean it that we are given opportunities. We are. So the first one for me was when I was 19. No, I was 20. I was on my way to go and see, and we didn't touch on this at all, and I don't really, but what happened for me with that chameleon thing is that I tried to chameleon myself into relationships that I had no business being in, and stayed in relationships that were absolutely horrible for me, either emotionally, physically, like just all the ways. And even though I never experienced violence in my home, somehow I thought it was okay for this, boyfriend who was jealous to, smack me across the face or backhanded me, I just somehow it didn't. Yeah. So again, it's that lack of sense of self, right? It's not really about recreating a violent home. It was just somehow I didn't have enough self-esteem to say I'm worth more than this. Yeah, that hurts. So I was on my way to go see that violent boyfriend. I was on my way, even though I wasn't in the relationship anymore. I had a new boyfriend, a nice boyfriend, one who brought me flowers and, surprised me at work with birthday cakes and, all that beautiful stuff. No, I was on my way to go see the ex-boyfriend, and I got hit by a car as a pedestrian. And I know that sounds really terrible. And it was, and I almost died, and I didn't walk for a year, and it was it was not a very gentle whisper, but it was the opportunity for me to look at my life and be like, oh wow, like I am really making some bad choices, and maybe this is the time to regroup and change. But I didn't. Instead, my friends would come and pick me up in my wheelchair and take me to the bar with them. It was all fun. Like, again, I don't want to make it seem like I was like waking up in the morning and calling someone to like get me to the bar at 20 years old. That's not the story, but still, it was not recognized as the wake up call. And the second one was when I was running an after hours club in Vancouver, again, note to self, not a very smart thing to do. The kinds of people who come to after hours clubs are not always, yes, there's just the fun partier people, but there's
Mm.
also, a whole dark element
And this is
there.
when you've already made a promise to your husband too, right?
No, no, this
Oh,
is before
okay.
that. This is before
Okay.
this. I'm 29 at the time of this. It was 1999 and or 28. And running this after hours club. And one night, all of our people didn't show up. It's a long story, but the bottom line is it ended up being like three of us trying to run an after hours club, me as the DJ, him trying to run the door, and one guy running the bar. Like no security, no, none of the things that you kind of need when you're taking care of a
Mm.
place that's running that sort of place. Anyway, there ends up being a fight, there ends up being a shooting, and my business partner is shot and killed. And I see this. I don't see the actual shooting. I hear that, but I am there with him, when he dies, before the, ambulance can even get there. And it's again, my whole life imploded because of that. And it's mostly because, there was a huge change to my life immediately. The after hours that I'm running every weekend is gone. Now I don't have the same amount of money. I'm supposed to be moving into a condo. And so I end up going back to Toronto. And again, is huge opportunity, huge wake up call opportunity for me to, kind of examine my life, look at the choices I'm making, the people I'm hanging out with, where I'm ending up. Like you talked about, guns and like,
Mm.
who would have thought? Like, I'm this, like, I feel like I want to say I'm this like innocent, fairly sheltered person who ends up in a place where someone is murdered. And I don't. My friends from high school, reach out and say, "Hey, we're opening a club. Do you want to be the resident DJ?" And I will go on a merry-go-round for 5 more years. And when I say merry-go-round, I mean literally 5 years of every weekend, the same thing over and over and over again. And that is in more the period where I met my husband and,
Mm.
all of that stuff. But those were the two things that should have been, could have been, maybe not should have, there's no should have, could have been wake up calls for me.
Mm.
My actual wake up call isn't as, I never had the external circumstances match what they should have, because I drank and drove. I could have ended up with impaired charges or hurting someone else, myself, it like so many times. I honestly think that is my biggest, you know, regret, besides smoking and throwing cigarette
Mm.
butts on the floor, and what the damage I did to my body by doing drugs and alcohol for all those years. My biggest regret is driving drunk, and the potential of what could have happened. But I never ended up in a hospital, a jail, or an accident, or none of those things happened. But what happened is that, that lying thing was eating away at the fabric of my relationship, but it was also eating away at my soul, right? Because I would look at myself in the mirror and I would say to myself, "Okay, Annie, tonight, just a couple of drinks, no white substances to make it better, just a couple drinks," and I would mean it, right? And so now I'm not just lying to someone else, I'm lying to myself, which for whatever reason is, I think, probably more soul destroying than anything else.
Mm.
Or the inability to meet my own um, uh, expectations. So the very short version is that I went out on a school night. I still called it school nights because I never drank on school nights. I had little rules in place, right? I don't drink on school nights. I don't drink at work functions. And I don't drink when I know that I can't find the white powder that will make everything else, even out, and I can stay, in control and not lose my yeah, the like no barfing and passing out and all that stuff. And I broke all the rules on this one random night. This is why it's so weird, right? It was a Thursday, it was a work thing. It's like, it should not have been anything. It should never have been what it turned into. But I blacked out, and I blacked out meaning like I don't remember anything past dinner. And when I came to, and thankfully I was somewhere where at least I knew when I came to, and I was like, "Oh," and like coming to from a blackout when you're like not the next morning, actually still like in the night, is, I'm sure that must have happened to me before. Like, I'm not saying I never blacked out before that night, but it was the first time that I was aware that I blacked out. And now I'm coming to, and I'm being told like all these stories of the night and what happened, and I can't remember any of it. And it, like, I hang on to this, not in like in like a punishing way, but I can access that feeling. I can access the like absolutely soul sick, oh my God moment that I had of just like, alcohol is not working. I can never do this again. This is over. And I know exactly how that feels like. I feel it in my gut. And
Mm,
thank God I can still feel it, all these years later. I knew, I knew the jig was up, done, like hook, like there was no like, do not pass go, do not collect, like it was done. And I knew it. And I'm so grateful for that because even though, like I said, the outside, it maybe didn't look like that bad on the outside, like I didn't get hauled away to jail or in an ambulance or, have some external thing, lose a job, lose a relationship, but it was done. And I
mm,
was so sick physically from the amount I drank. I was so sick emotionally, mentally, spiritually, all of the ways that I was. And I'm like, so that's why that line just went,
mm,
right? I went straight to a treatment center 2 days later. I went to one AA meeting on the Saturday night, and I don't know truthfully whether I had to go to treatment, but I say this to people all the time. It's like who you talk to about recovery, like what did you do, will greatly influence probably how you go about it if you're looking for treatment or to treat your addiction or alcoholism. Like lots of people will just go to AA. Lots of people will find other self-help or mutual aid. Other people will go to a doctor, take medication, try to reduce craving. Like there's so many ways. I went the route that the one person that I knew who had been sober already, I just followed her footsteps. Like she went to treatment. Okay, I guess I'm going to treatment. So at 7:30 in the morning, I called that friend. And again, I love the synchronicity or this, the serendipity of this. I had lunch plans with that friend that day.
mm.
The one friend in the world that I had that was so, sorry, I had two friends that are sober. I shouldn't say that. Todd was sober too, but Georgia was sober. I called Georgia at 7:30. I was like, can we have lunch now? I need help.
Mm.
And that, if we aren't
Wow.
already there, say like that's the TSN turning point for me is like I said those words, I need help.
Yeah.
And that's what happened. That's what created, a third period, like an opportunity for a third period and
Yeah.
a life that I have today was saying that I needed help and then accepting the help that I needed.
I asked for help so many times in my early, well, in towards the end, but it was always help me. Can you lend me some money? Help
Yeah.
me. Can you, but when I was absolutely crushed, there was nothing in me except an authentic help me. In a church basement in Toronto at Love and Tolerance when those words came out of my mouth. And like you say, it's about being able to accept that help. And what I've learned too, Annie, is that there's that duality to asking for help. Is that especially in 12-step recovery, is that when you're asking someone for help, you're helping them fulfill their purpose. So there's that exchange where they're receiving so much by being able to sponsor you. So we before we go to the third period, I want to know what your early recovery is like, because like they say, it's just the beginning. Our third period, I want to really get into the next level. So, because and bring in the idea around codependency and how we can still, even though alcohol and drugs are out of the equation, um, character traits can still weave their way through our lives in kind of behavior that might not be as harmful, but they still can, and they are part of our recovery, but they can be a little bit of a hindrance later on as we recognize, that maybe maybe codependency still does creep in through our life.
Oh yes. Well, the first thing I want to say about, well, like I said, but I've already sort of stated it. I don't know if I needed to go to rehab. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. It's what I did, and I'm grateful that I did because it gave me, 5 weeks to keep myself really separated from my life and all the things that probably would have, you know, and God bless my ex-husband. I mean, he taught me so many wonderful things. I'm sad that we're not friends. He is a wonderful human being. Um, but he did not understand my decision to go to treatment. I wouldn't say understand it. He didn't think I was an alcoholic. He
Mm,
had a very distinct idea of what an alcoholic is. And I didn't drink every day and I didn't hide alcohol, around the house. And I wasn't under a bridge and with a brown paper bag, and maybe those were his stereotypes or whatever. But he felt very, and rightfully so, he was left out of the decision, but it was a decision that I was making, that I knew I needed help, period. Now, did I need to go to rehab? Like I said, maybe not. Maybe if I had just tried going to AA or some other group or something like that right from the beginning and stick with it and stayed sober, maybe things would have been different. I don't know. But the decision to go to rehab, was the one that I made. And it was a 12-step based treatment center. So, there was meetings every day. And so that foundation was set for, what needs to happen, a program of recovery, an action being taken on a daily basis. It's not, just wake up in the morning and hope or even pray. Maybe praying is part of some people's how they stay sober. And then I'm not saying it doesn't work, but I'm saying, like, I don't know what other recipe. I just know the recipe that I followed. So taking action every day, working my steps and doing those things in early recovery and being at a meeting every day, like that's what it looked like. Setting myself up for life with lots of, changes to my community too, right? I'm not saying I don't still see my friends who drink. I do, but I don't see them in bars. And I think the one thing I did in early recovery that I know other people were kind of like, you're gonna what? It was like probably 30 days in, and my dear, dear friends, I had booked them to come and DJ in Vancouver from Toronto, and I wanted to go see them. So I brought a sober person with me, and we went to the bar and we danced and we had a good time, and nothing happened. But it probably, in some people's eyes was like, you're gonna what? Are you crazy? But it's anyway. So the foundation that I set in early recovery was lots and lots and lots of meetings. Like I went every day to the noon women's meeting. I got a step group. I got a sponsor. I was doing steps. I was being of service within very short amount of time at my home group. I was very, very, very much in 12-step recovery as being my primary and almost exclusive, like the way I was treating my addiction was through 12-step program. I did have a therapist, and but I want to just say that because that is so probably for the first 3 years. That's not that early, but I'm saying the first 3 years I went to a meeting every single day, sometimes twice, a lot of times twice. And I changed everything about my life, which was not, I said, like, I didn't have a lot of circumstantial things change when I was drinking. Like I didn't lose a lot of things, but I lost all of those things almost in my first year. Like I changed my job. I left, I had a high stress job working as a project manager at Dell, and that really didn't work for me. So, a couple of years later, I got out of that. My husband and I divorced. So like there was a lot of big things that happened in early recovery that, they don't recommend making big decisions. Well, I didn't really have a choice in the divorce piece. But what I did do, and I always say to people when they're new to recovery, is you have to be active. You have to be active in your recovery, actively doing things differently than you would have been doing them when you were in active addiction. So active recovery, and that can look different for every single person. I don't think the prescription, I don't think there's a one size fits all. I did in the beginning because that's all I knew, right? When all I knew was 12-step recovery, I was one of those people who would have told you, like, this is the only way, and so we can talk more about the other things if you want, but that was my early recovery story. Was a lot of change, a lot of tears, and a lot of meetings.
Insert sound effect of the horn buzzer. Perfect timing. And we can breathe for our second. I'm wondering whether or not in changing rooms nowadays, if there's any kind of group meditation that's going on. I think what's the coach for the Chicago Bulls, Jackson? What's it? Phil Jackson. I think he was into meditations and stuff, and I think he studied a lot of indigenous tribes and what they did. So I know the Chicago Bulls started to do things like that, but that's something I want to do in intermissions, is do a little meditation.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
I mean, meditation is a huge part of my recovery today. But you mean literally you want us to meditate right now?
No, no, no. I'm just thinking about
Okay.
this,
Oh, in the
like what I would
actual
do in the
intermission
intermission.
in
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
yeah. Well, I'll
Yeah.
tell you the other thing that I love. One of my best friends, Mary, worked for years for Vancouver Coastal Health in the addiction services in different areas. She starts every meeting with
Yeah.
a meditation.
Mm.
Every business when I first saw this, I was like, oh my, like, yes, like, but why are we not? Like,
Why are we not
it's
doing
just,
it?
yes,
Just
at the
just
beginning of everything.
yeah. There's my new sponsor is bringing me like he's teaching me about this. I think it's a book. He's not I haven't read it and he hasn't shown it to me yet. He's kind of teasing me with it, but it's called The Two Listeners. It's basically the foundation of where AA comes from, from pre-Oxford group in England, where people were just talking to each other and inviting God into the conversation, and with a meditation, and then it's like whatever comes is this is God. And that's why I think if you listen to like Clancy speak about AA, he goes, AA is not the 12 steps, it's not the rooms, it's not a spiritual experience. You can get that shit anywhere. AA is two drunks talking to each other, where one convinces the other to believe in something he hasn't yet believed in.
Oh, that's great. I love that. And
Yeah.
you know what my sponsor always says, she's not really my sponsor anymore. She's more of a mentor, like sisters in sobriety, we call each other. But she always says, where two or more are gathered for the
Yeah.
right purpose, God is. And so that's why whenever it's not, I'm not going to say I'm perfect at it, but it's like at
Mm.
any time now that there's an important conversation, like I did it before you and I started speaking, right? I took a
Mm.
moment to just invite my higher power to be with me, be with us, be in this conversation. And so I 100%,
Yeah.
100% unequivocally believe that, yeah, when a higher power is invited in, there's
It's
miracles.
limitless. Power is limitless. And with that, let's start our third period.
All right.
Annie, I every time you speak, I relate to it so well, because in my early recovery, I couldn't get a job. I was unemployable. I was such a mess, and all I had was meetings, my sponsor, going through the steps, and taking action in my life in recovery for the first time. It brought about a humility in me that I never really had. And when I shared in a meeting I was struggling for money, the guy who asked me to speak said, "Nick, I've got this construction firm. Do you want to come and tear out kitchens down in the beaches in Toronto?" And I was like, "Yes, please." And I was 47 years old at the time. I was like a year and a half sober. And I was finally asking for help, and I was tearing out kitchens and getting calluses on my hands. And then someone who as well offered said to apply for a job at the Westin on the Harborfront as to help out in the gym. And basically I was a glorified towel boy for 3 months, and I'm 47 years old, and I was putting towels on chairs in a swimming pool. But it gave me this kind of sense of humility. But all I was doing really super well was sponsoring men and going to meetings and building some self-esteem in my life. And
Mm.
from that, what born was Retribe. And from that, an opportunity to move back to London. And from that, starting Retribe here, where everything's been a progression of making a ton of mistakes along the way, but putting service and helping other people in AA as kind of the primary focus. And all of a sudden, all of these miracles have happened in my life. And I know when we met 6 years ago, it was at Recovery Day in Toronto, something that you organized. So, from your throwing yourself into sponsoring women in AA and recovery, how is I won't say career, but how has your life gone from telling those lies and manipulating our way into jobs to letting the universe kind of unfold and present itself with these places where we're specifically designed to be?
One thing I just realized is I didn't say much about the codependency, and I want to just say, because you mentioned it again about sponsoring, like my early sponsoring of women in recovery when I was new was a shit show, pardon my French, but because I had absolutely no idea how to have relationships that weren't codependent. So I was
Mm.
doing a far more taking care of than than, and chasing and running around and picking up from hospitals and all that stuff. And I mean, I'm still very dear friends with the people I'm speaking of right now. So I know that, and I'm not saying their names, but I'm just saying that was that was definitely my codependence. And so, around year 5, I finally started looking at the Al-Anon and the CODA and the ACOA programs and looking at my own, codependency. So I'll just to close that loop. But that progression of, from moving out of that codependent into, healthy relationship and how to really be of service to the women that I sponsor or, later coaching and being a sober companion to, it's about what we just talked about, right? It's being I like the step 11 prayer, right? Like, make me a channel. Like, it's not, I am a vessel. I am not, when people say, oh, thank you, you've helped me so much. And I'm like, I appreciate the thanks and I will accept the thanks because I physically, maybe showed up to do, step work with you or, worked through an issue with you as a coach or whatever. And always I know it's like, not mine, like, not me. There's a beautiful song that I love. I think it's Satnam Kaur or whatever. I can never pronounce her name properly. I feel bad, but she talks about, that the glory, and I'm not a religious person. Like, it is totally funny. It didn't say it at all, but Catholic, and totally rebelled against it and was like, absolutely not, from the time I was 14 until the day I asked for help. And when Georgia showed up at my door and I opened it and I said, thank God you're here. And God today to me means love, universal power of love, the power of life itself. But to understand like that the glory of someone, like of being able to help someone is not, I am a vessel, I'm a channel. I am, when I am taking care of myself spiritually, and when I'm allowed, like when I get myself out of the way and don't have an agenda of my own, like, whatever, then I can be of real service and I can actually show up for women. And I don't sponsor a lot of women anymore. I have a really strong belief that, and again, this comes from my sponsor, right? Is like, if I have both of my hands, out to others, then first of all, I got no hand to go to my higher power, and I'm not taking care of me, and so I call it party of 5. I say to any women that I'm sponsoring, do not make me your higher power. First of all, do not make me your only source of, strength and who you're going to call when things are going to, going sideways. You want to have 5 people. Maybe they're women from your step group. Maybe they're women from your church group. Maybe they're women who've known you for a long time as friends. Maybe they're former sponsors. Maybe it's someone who's going to be a future sponsor, like whatever, but people who know you so that you're not relying on just me. And so, that journey of sponsorship into, being of service, and worked at the treatment center that I went to, doing communications. And I think that really, if I'm, my sponsor always talks about too, that, you'll be given an opportunity in recovery to do everything again, differently, and so I used to do a lot of public speaking when I was young, and I liked that, enjoyed that part of school and whatever. And that gift of communication, maybe from all the reading that I did as a child, or maybe from just becoming a better listener, right? I mean, I think that's what I liked when you said that book's called The Two Listeners. Like, listening has been the greatest gift I've been given in recovery. I went and thought I was going to become a counselor, so I did the basic counseling skills course, and what did I learn? I learned how to listen, and then I worked last year for about 1.5 years for Seek Healing, which is also an organization that all they're about is teaching people how to really truly listen. And so, how, like, all of that has added up to, just being like, my career trajectory has changed so much again, like in the last few years, like I moved away from working in treatment centers and being, on the front lines that way. And like I said, I don't sponsor as many women anymore because I feel that it's like sponsoring a couple of women properly or well, if you, I don't like those words because it means it's sort of like good versus bad, but just like in a way that feels right for me.
Mhm.
And then having enough time for myself, because again, like I think for many years well into recovery, I was so busy working, throwing myself into things like Recovery Day and advocacy work and all that stuff, that there wasn't a lot of time for my own recovery. And when I did do my own recovery, it was like sort of in this, I'm going to attack it mode. And what I've learned about, circling back to the very beginning, is that this traumatized young girl, baby, all of those things needs things to be far more gentle,
Yeah.
which is my new word. It's all about gentleness and peace. And so now I've moved out of the city and into the nature,
Mhm.
and I just keep things really simple and quiet, and um, that is a far more appealing and healthy place for me to be, in order to let the next thing unfold, which is happening. There's an unfolding that's going on right now, but it's just, I have to say this. I have to say it out loud, because you didn't do it on purpose, but you kind of called me out when you said, like I still, right? It is not over for me to still try to manipulate a
Mhm.
situation. I might have the best of intentions, like it looks good, like I'm doing it for the right reasons, but there's still, oh, there are days where I need to get out of the way still and ask the universe, what, and not just think that I know what's best. And so I've been creating a new business with someone, and I set myself up in this house, and I really love this house and believe that it's like the universe presented it to me to be here. And I still, I just have to be really aware that my own
Mm.
things that I think are what I need and what I want, is just, asking,
Yeah.
humbly asking, what is your will for me today? And where do you want me to be? Where do you want me to go? Who should I be talking to? And so
Yeah.
thank you for that reminder.
You are someone who I see who's very active and very busy in recovery in the community and doing all of the support you're doing, particularly for women. But I'm wondering, when you kind of, you remember the 19-year-old girl who took that slap because she didn't feel that she was worthy, you know, when along the line in your recovery process did you look in the mirror and go, I'm Annie, I'm worthy? When was the self-esteem brought back up by being of service and being guided into that place where finally self was being built or
Oh, that,
revealed?
yeah. I mean, it was, I don't know that there was like one thing that like tipped the scale. I think it was exactly that. It just all those, like one more day of being humble, one more day of being of service, one more day, and slowly, and it's not perfect. Like honestly, there are still, um I would never be in a relationship today where someone was violent with me, or that, like, I think that for sure I can say, unequivocally, like that would never happen again. um and I also, not that long ago, found myself in a relationship with somebody that was emotionally abusive, and I had to like I think it was 2.5 years ago, because I've been single for a while now. But like I was like, wow, like is this really like like
Mm.
and so I have the one thing that I know for sure, and I love Tara Brock's work and how she talks about the second arrow. So, if somebody injures me, or if I'm injured, the worst thing that I can do is then injure myself again by beating myself up for what I've done. So I have to have a lot of compassion, you know. Maya Angelou, when you know better, you do better.
Mm.
True. I also, my caveat to that is, and sometimes you don't, or sometimes I don't,
Yeah.
because I am um, still working through the trauma, intergenerational childhood, like all of those things. And so when it shows up again, right, like it did a couple of years ago, and I found myself in the situation, but I left.
Mm.
I walked out one day and I didn't look back. I didn't, again, do not pass go, do not collect. I just walked out. I didn't
Mm.
even explain myself because I didn't need to. So
Yeah.
maybe that's I hadn't really, yeah, again, that maybe that was it. Maybe that was the moment. And that was 13 years in, or 12, whatever, a long time into recovery, before I was able to do that. But thank you for reminding me that I did. I
We
did walk.
do, and for me, it was a like we're the same age. I've sobriety date is different, but um, I was like 49 years old, I think, and still kind of beating myself up and self-hatred. And I think it was when I moved here, and for some reason I just wrote down the names of the people who I'd sponsored, and I went. It was a lot, and a lot of them were really doing amazingly well. The people who'd really committed and taken the action in the recovery, and I looked in the mirror, and I think it was around the time that you were over here, and I looked in the mirror and I said, "I'm proud of you, Nick." And that's the first time that ever came out. I'm proud of you. And I think I met myself. I think for the first time at 49 years old, I met myself. I met the scared 8-year-old boy. I met the confused teenager. I met the manipulative BSer, in the 20s who got a lot of stuff. And I could see that, I was just a person who was riddled by fear. I wasn't trying to harm anybody. It was just stuff that happened. And I think it is in this service to other people that I built some self-esteem up. And when you held out your hands like this, it really reminded me of something that I like to talk to people about, because I watched this low budget documentary series on the pyramid codes. It's called The Pyramid Codes. It's on YouTube. I really recommend you watch it, because it talks about sacred masculine and sacred feminine energies, and it talks about it gives a theory into when the pyramids could have been made, and which is a lot longer ago than it's been stated. And the woman notes, she says, note the Egyptian hieroglyphs. All of the gods have left hands. The left hands are for bestowing. Only gods can give. They don't receive. And then I just in that moment, I looked in the bed. I was like, I got a left hand. I got a right hand. I know I'm not a god. What's the right hand for? And just in the next sentence, the right hand is for receiving. So the left hand for bestowing, the right hand receiving, where these spirits having this human experience. That makes a lot of sense to me. If I'm going to be a channel and part of rather than the center of, I need to be able to give help, but I also need to be able to ask for help. Otherwise, the link isn't complete.
Yeah. Yeah. Give gladly I give, gratefully I receive. My sponsor taught me that one too, but you're so right, Nick. Like that is it. It's why the 12-step program works, is because it is a give and a receive, because it's a flow, and without the continuation. And so that's why this year I chose the word receive, because I had been very good at, giving, and not so good at receiving, and I was also walking and talking with a friend yesterday about, I try to do it all on my birthday. I try to like condense it all into one day. I like all year long, I give and I help and I give and I help. And then on my birthday, I'm like, okay, I'll receive today, and, take in all the love and the thanks and the well wishes of people. But it's not a one day a year thing. That's the flow. And I love, I'll watch the movie for sure, but it is, I just had a really beautiful experience. We don't have time to get into it today, but I had a beautiful experience last Sunday. And that was the vision. That was the vision that I had, was had said my intention for the ceremony was to receive love. And I was receiving love, and it was really beautiful, and really like, just one of those incredible experiences that everyone I hope would have at some point in their life. And then the message came in.
Yeah.
Give and receive, love and healing, love and healing. And it just kept flowing. And then it became, like I said, this just, the channel piece, right? It's not even, it's not me, right? I'm not giving or receiving. I am allowing that to be part and through. Mm-hmm.
Living a life in recovery is a beautiful thing. But what I've learned is it's also a place where I can take my will back, my self-will, and think, oh, look all these people I've helped. I'm a superhero, I'm here to save the day, and I can take my will back quite easily, and it gets me into a place of restriction and anxiety. I've done it in the family situation that I'm in, where You know, when remember I mentioned that I finally could meet myself. I think finally I was able to meet somebody. And then I met my partner today, my fiance, and she came into my life. And she was, oh, she's got 3 boys, and she's from the Czech Republic. So all her boys, she got them playing ice hockey. So in my mind, Annie, I'm like, oh, I'm here to save this family, and took self will back right away. And I eventually discovered that I wasn't here to save them. I had to do some deep dive work. I used the tools that the program has given me, and I used further investigation that I've done in other practices to discover that really they're here to teach me and to help me heal from my childhood traumas, and that we're in this all together. And some things have happened in your challenges have happened in recovery where, number one, you haven't thought about drinking or using, but you were really stressed out a couple of times, you know, over where you were living and over that little guy right next to you. And the miracle is that at no point did you drink or use, but you know, how did you deal with it all? Tell people what happened. We still do have 4 minutes left in this third period, so I want people to understand that life will happen and huge challenges will happen, but we have other ways to deal with it than to turn to isolation and substance use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, it comes back, I think, to what we have been saying, which is asking for help, because and it looks different in the different situations. You know, when I was struggling with some some people had moved into my home and they were professional tenants and they were refusing to leave, and it was just this absolutely untenable situation that was, you know, I was riddled with anxiety and sleeping with a knife under my bed because I was actually scared for my life. You know, like the biggest, I mean, first and foremost, prayer. Like, I'm not going to say, you know, that that it's something that's so out there and you know, intangible, but prayer and you know, one of my favorite expressions in 12 steps, you know, have you prayed about it as much as you've talked about it? And a lot of times that's not what I do, right? It might not be my default setting is to go to prayer first, but it is this thing that I need to do in order to at least turn it over to something greater than myself to fix on the, you know, from the outside world. And then there's things that I need to do and the steps that I need to take. Like, I had to take action. I had to, like, go to the tenancy board. I had to go to the police. I had to, you know, talk to friends and ask for help and accept help for those kinds of things. And, you know, staying close to the people that care about me and close to my program at those times, always key. So I mean, all of those things come into play. You know, other like practices like having a therapist or doing other modalities, whether it's for me, you know, yoga, meditation, breath work, those are big pieces of what I do. You know, listening to music and having walks in nature and being with Frankie and just having my, like, support, right? Like, again, it's, to me, it's like asking for help and being able to receive the help, um,
Mm.
whether that's spiritual, physical, like whatever way. So I think that's what made it so that I never had to think about turning to you know, a negative coping mechanism.
Mm. And we've got 2 minutes just to wrap up the story because Frankie is a miracle. Tell people what happened with Frankie and everything that happened.
All
And
right. We gotta
yeah.
at least get him in the shot for just a second. So I've had Frankie since he was a puppy. He is literally, you know, just a glue, right? That is, you know, it's just every single day we're together. And after the horrificness of that home experience, I went to Costa Rica to reset my nervous system and to, you know, calm myself down and have some quiet, peaceful time. And unfortunately, um, you know, whether it was COVID or people's desperation, people in Costa Rica are used to making money off tourism. They weren't able to, and they broke into my home where I was living there, and they, you know, took other valuables, but they took Frankie, perhaps because they thought they could sell him. It was right after Lady Gaga's dogs had been stolen. I like to think maybe it was because they saw that and thought it might be. Anyways, whatever the reason, Frankie was taken from me. And what got me through that, and I, again, it's very spiritual in nature, but you know, as a yoga teacher, one of the other things that I forgot to mention, yeah, I do that too.
Hmm.
When I'm one of the Sanskrit language mantras, which I find mantra and singing and humming and things that vibrate the vagus nerve are very powerful things. But I repeated a mantra the whole time. I mean, I did the physical steps. I prayed. I mean, I did the physical steps, meaning I put up posters. I made posts on Facebook. I did all the things that I could do. But what kept me sane and not, my sponsor even said to me, she's like, I was never worried, not once in all this time you've been sober, that you would ever drink again unless something happened to Frankie. So I repeated the mantra, Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu, which means may all beings be peaceful, joyful, and free. And may my actions contribute to that in some way. And to me, that it really, it's what we've been talking about, right? It's giving a loving sentiment out to the universe that includes all beings, including me. But it was an unselfish just thing. And I wasn't doing it on purpose. There was no intention behind it of like, I wasn't sitting there going, oh, please bring Frankie back. Please bring, I mean, of course that's what I wanted, but that's not what I said. It's not wasn't the action that I took. The action that I took was to just put a positive sentiment out into the universe. But again, unintentionally, it was just something I did to keep my brain from thinking about all the terrible things that could have happened to him, etc. And on the third day, I was about to say he rose again. See, Catholicism is still in there. Yep. On the third day, I got a call from a young girl in Spanish, which I didn't speak. So I had to give the phone to somebody, and she informed me that she had bought Frankie from some man on a beach in some place 4 hours from where I was, and that she had him and that she would bring him back to me. And there really are no words for the depths of despair that I went to. And then the height of, it made me feel a little crazy, to be quite honest with you, because to be that low and then get him back and be that happy again was quite an extreme, emotional roller coaster. But of course, today being American Thanksgiving and stuff too, I'll just say that I've been grateful every single day for everything because of that experience, because to have him be gone and then come back was definitely a miracle. And definitely, people say, how did you get him back? And I'm like, God, like the power of love, like all those people who forwarded that Facebook post, I think it was shared like 600 times or something, made it so that eventually that girl saw that he was my emotional support dog and that she had bought a stolen dog and she brought him back. And they drove like 4 hours to give him to me, so.
Can you repeat the mantra one more time as we end this period?
Of course. In Sanskrit it is Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu. In English, may all beings be peaceful, joyful, and free. And may my actions contribute to that in some small way.
Beautiful. Thank you. I think I'm going to throw to a quick overtime period though.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah, okay. Because I look at you, I hear you, I receive you, I honor you. You're part of my life. You inspire me. You fulfill a role in my life. And when I started this company, I didn't think about the name too much, but I did start to be inquisitive about how we evolved as human beings and how we were tribal. For tens of thousands of years of human evolution, we belonged to a tribe, normally of around 15 to 30 people. And we gave to that tribe. We had a purpose in that tribe. We were a hunter, a gatherer. We could have been a child bearer. We could have been an auntie or a nurse who looked after the children, like a doctor, a shaman, a basket weaver, a guard, a guardian, we had roles. And I have this theory, Annie, about why some of us are afflicted with an allergy or an abnormal reaction to a mind-altering substance. And I was like, why is it that my body is not designed to process substances the way that other people can? And I know you don't like the word normal, but normal being about 90% of the population. So roughly 1 in 10 of us are not designed to use mind-altering substances. And then I thought, how people use ceremony, ayahuasca and psilocybin, DMT, animus curiae, the marijuana, they used substances of this earth to have these spiritual experiences and to be close to the universe and to be connected. And I really honor that. I think that that is part of our human evolution and something that we've been cut off from. But then I was also thinking that when people are doing these ceremonies, there was a time when saber-toothed tigers were running around, and there was like this time when, you know, people were purging and they needed to be looked after. And I thought about a quote from Mother Teresa when she said that alcoholics were her favorite type of people because they had this innate need and want and to be of service and to help one another. And then I was like, wow, maybe we were designed to look after everybody while they were having these spiritual experiences. So I say to people that it's not that because we come to AA and you're told you can't drink. And I go, no, I rephrase it now. And it's not that I can't drink, it's that I'm not meant to drink. How has, in your final words, how have you found your purpose? Because we're the same age. And I know it's always evolving and changing, but how have you aligned yourself and you feel comfortable with the woman that you are today in finding your purpose?
Mm. Well, I think my purpose is ever unfolding. It's not, you know, there's been so many versions already, you know, 2.0 and 2.5. And you know, Lisa and Nalita and I always joke, we're at level 5.2 now, level 5. But yeah, I think I love what you just said. Ceremony is a part of my recovery. And working with other people to, you know, I'm not sure. I think breath work and music would be my contributions next. If I'm, and maybe even as a death doula, I'm really, really, really love everything you said about tribe. And one of the things I feel like we've really let go of is how we work with death and how we treat it and aging and all of that stuff. So I think that's the next, maybe what is coming together after all the things that I've done and learned and processed is to, you know, use death as a tool to live better, you know, not to wait until we're on our deathbed to make our amends or to, you know, so yeah, I've definitely in my last ceremony with like that's what came through, this purpose of breath work, music, and ceremony, like embracing the aging and the death process as being part of this whole evolution and not looking at it as an ending. So there are no endings. There's just transformation.
There is no endings, and but we do have to end this overtime period. Annie, thank you so much for joining me. I really, really appreciate it. You're amazing, beautiful light in my life. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Nick. Thank you for all the things you brought to light for me this morning. It was really, yeah, as always, because there is that other higher love coming through. Like I really do feel like I learned some things that I haven't been. Yeah, you've enlightened me again. So blessings to you and to everyone who's watching eventually as they're watching. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for joining us. We'll see you later. Bye.